Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Future of Accountancy Operations, How AI is Changing the Way that Work Gets Done. I'm Benjamin Turner. I'm the UK Managing Director at Automee. I'll be facilitating today's discussion. We've brought together experts with very different perspectives, from running accountancy practices, leading finance transformation, developing AI technologies, and securing them. And we'll explore how AI is changing the way accountancy and finance operations work. One of the things you'll hear today is that AI is no longer the preserve of large organizations with deep pockets and dedicated IT teams. AI delivered as a service is opening up capabilities that, until recently, were simply out of reach for many smaller firms. Our objective today is to help you leave this webinar with a clearer understanding of where AI can genuinely add value, what questions you should be asking yourselves, and practical ideas that you can take straight back into your own firms. We'll hear a series of short perspectives from each of our panelists before opening up into a discussion, and we'll share the webinar recording with you afterwards. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Piotr Witek. He's the managing partner and CEO of More in Poland.
Good morning.
Simon Spears, Finance Transformation Director at Active Care Group. Rhys, a partner at Open Reply. Stuart Black, the Managing Director of Ergos.
Hello
and
there.
Dominik, Laskowski, the CEO of Automee.
Hello.
Thank you. So we'll begin with Piotr's perspective as someone leading an accountancy practice and seeing firsthand how AI is influencing both clients and the profession, changing client expectations, service delivery, and day-to-day operation of an accountancy firm. Piotr, over to you.
Thank you, Benjamin. So first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to share my perspective from, let's say, the client's perspective and also as an accounting office. So first of all, as we all know, AI is somehow suggested, recommended to all our operations. Nevertheless, the main issue is that we are thinking in an old way. We try to adopt it in the existing platforms, existing way of doing. And from my perspective, that's a very, very, let's say, mistaken approach, meaning that we want to change something which is old-fashioned to the new world of AI, where everything becomes new. So what is the perspective of the customers? The customers, they are waiting for the services which are delivered on a, let's say, very, very daily basis. So not like once a month or once a week. They want to receive the data immediately. If we can do it online, that would be perfect. So in Poland, for example, with all the electronic stage of implementation, for example, of invoicing, we now have changed completely the system where the, let's say, paper documents were cheated. So we know that everything is electronized. Therefore, our clients are expecting that we will also react very quickly. So how it impacts our work? We want to have something which is 100% automatized, and that's real. I mean, for the middle-sized operations in accounting, we can codify with AI agents in a way that they are just replacing work of our accountants, and they are delivering something on an online basis. So we discussed, for example, with Dominik that in very, very soon we'll be able to deliver the P&L, which is online. I mean, something which is just real time. So that changes completely the perspective. But we should not think like, okay, let us adopt the system we have. Let us change it into the way which makes it completely different. What I mean by completely different, it means just including the technology in what is needed here. So it's not that we become, as accountants, we become IT specialists. We become just people who let IT technique and AI technique to understand what we are doing. And that's the change, because it means we must be open to new technology, try to to understand that, well, it requires from us the new mindset. And that's my main point, that, well, the new mindset means, well, not just thinking in the old way, but in a new way.
Thank you, Piotr. That's really, really interesting. If I can move on to Simon. Simon has spent many years redesigning finance operations and leading transformation programs. He'll explore how AI is making transformation achievable for organizations of all scales and sizes. Simon, over to you.
Hi, everyone. So I think in 2010, 2011, I was part of an organization supporting very large-scale shared services in a wide range of areas, from finance and accounting, general back office processing, even customer care. But we were first move advantage. We had first move advantage. We started taking on very, very large, low-cost centers and industrializing the processes through robotics at the time. Which was the seminal start of AI as we know it right now. But everything had to be incredibly structured, but it was incredibly costly to actually put into place. So it needed scale. We would go into, as an outsourcing organization, we would go in and offer 30 to 50% cost reductions. When they were in low-cost areas, that would be incredibly difficult to do without the use of the Blue Prisms, the Automation Anywheres of the time to do this. So there's a lot of opportunity, but it took a lot of cost. 6 offshore staff or 2 onshore staff, that was the general metric that we were actually using. So I'm personally interested to understand, and I can see the opportunities now for AI to be deployed in much smaller use cases, making it much more accessible to the mid-size and SME market, the small businesses, because it's able to actually deal with much more unstructured data than the structured data that there was before. It can learn processes rather than having to deploy lots of people at a high cost in order to actually understand them. And it can, generally, I believe there's more understanding within a lot of the departments across organizations that you deploy these services to, that will prevent the roadblocks. So technologists back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, would have stopped the deployment of robots because they literally thought that they were going to do whatever, they were going to go rogue, do whatever, harvest data, process it, store it, use it elsewhere. And I think we've got a lot more maturity in our understanding now that that's not necessarily the case. Now, I still do think that there's a little bit of hesitancy and there is a little bit of trust, but there is more and more, much more of a groundswell of understanding that it does what it's told. You need to give it the right instructions. You need to ensure you understand what the parameters are, but it's not going to go rogue. At the moment, I'm not personally using AI deployed in our organization. We're still quite immature in terms of our organization. We're trying to integrate, get data lakes right, get the processes right, make sure that the policies are there in order that we don't do stuff that's not actually required. So there's still a lot of work to be done in that area, but I see opportunities just through personal advice, creating policies, recording Teams meetings in order to create the processes that will create the greater speed to value, and it's just so much more accessible at a much smaller scale. So I'm really interested to see what I can learn from this team to actually understand how smaller organizations can benefit from what I was able to achieve on a much larger scale many years ago.
Brilliant. I'm starting to jot down some questions to ask you all later on as a result of what I'm hearing here. Thank you. So on to Rhys. Rhys works at the forefront of AI and emerging technologies. He'll help us separate today's reality from tomorrow's possibilities and explain what organizations should really be paying attention to as AI evolves. Rhys, over to you.
Thanks, Benjamin. Yes, so I've been fortunate enough since 2022 to be working quite heavily with AI, both in terms of consuming it as a business, but also helping our customers use it to extract value. And I think that's probably the key area and driver that pushed me into it as an engineer, was to understand where the value of AI actually comes from. Coming out of 2022 into 2023, there was a huge amount of marketing and PR around AI has arrived, it's taken all of our jobs, it can do anything. And the reality is that AI is extremely useful. To pick up on some of the comments that Simon made, things like co-pilots allowing you to transcribe calls and meetings and synthesize information to allow you to spend more time doing human things and having conversations, and have these assistants recording that interaction so that you can refer to it later, is super useful versus trying to frantically sort of write down notes as you're going along. So coming in as assistant level technologies, that's been a big, particularly over the last couple of years, a big push in organizations to start the AI journey, is to start bringing in the tooling to assist employees. At the other end of the spectrum, there are organizations looking to fully automate and transform and leverage AI on a much larger scale. And part of what I do is I use AI in our business as the foundation for our AI first product engineering consultancy, which focuses on using AI to help very quickly design, ideate, build and deliver software products. We also use that experience to help customers understand where they can leverage AI. And there's a bit of an arms race between employee and customer expectations and the sort of the product thinking and service thinking of organizations. So to look at the landscape, probably only sort of 2-3 years ago, web search was king. Making sure that you had your websites optimized for search was critical. It helped drive a lot of traffic towards businesses. Now it's about your presence on platforms like ChatGPT and Claude. That comes with its own challenges in terms of controlling the narrative. So these types of tools will pull information about your organization from a variety of different sources, the majority of which might not necessarily be directly controlled by an organization. So making sure that the narrative of what your organization does, the products and services that it sells, is critical to make sure that as we see customers moving from traditional search to more conversational interfaces with the likes of ChatGPT and Claude, that companies are still relevant and still visible in that space. I've worked with customers who have run product launches and had a really successful marketing campaign online and on web, only to see that sort of translates into very little in terms of sales, because their customer base is moving from traditional web and search technologies to AI, into platforms like ChatGPT and Claude. There's an element of risk, adversity when it comes to AI. It's quite a scary tool to look at. I mean, Simon touched on it with robotic process automation. That when that sort of surfaced, it's the rise of the robots. They can do anything, but they're still deterministic systems that are driven by logic. With generative AI and large language models, we're now working with non-deterministic machines that have their own sort of quote unquote thought process on how to tackle a problem. And that's something in many cases that can follow many different paths. So at the extreme end of building products that are backed by AI, there are a lot of concerns and focus on things like guardrails and making sure that the large language models that are being interacted with are responding in appropriate ways, are responding with the right sort of content, are accurate in terms of their response. On the flip side, and I'm sure, Stuart, you'll probably dive into a bit more of this in detail later, but things about, I'm putting data into a large language model. Where does that actually go? Is that leaving the UK? Where are the servers that are working with my data? Is that data being used to train the next generation of large language models? And is that being trained on proprietary data? There have been stories over the last few years of organizations finding proprietary information about themselves through new generation models because employees have been putting data into these models. So there's a very broad spectrum of appetite and risk in terms of AI, from the very sort of basic, we're accelerating and improving the employee experience by providing our employees with assistance to help them do what they need to do on a daily basis, right the way through to, we're building enterprise level software that at the core is very AI driven, but governed by GDPR restrictions and governed by security of data and governed by sovereignty and those sorts of things. So it's a rather large landscape to work with. What I will say as a sort of a closing statement there is, lots of organizations I work with find just starting that journey quite overwhelming because it is such a big space. And I think one of the misalignments is the marketing that's sold with AI, that it can solve all of life's problems in a very relatively simple way, and the reality of bringing systems in that do promote meaningful change is a lot harder than starting small and getting your employees and your businesses AI literate with assistants that are helping sort of accelerate and improve value on a much smaller scale. And that's the sort of the journey that I advocate for with our customers, is start small and build big. Don't try and tackle AI as a whole. Don't try and transform your organization into an AI first business, because that is, it's scary and it takes a long time. But there are very quick wins of starting small with some sort of the employee level assistance and just getting familiar with the type of AI that's out there and the risks that are associated with its use. But it's a very fun environment to work in and to help customers explore.
Rhys, fascinating. Thank you very, very much for that. So technology only creates value if organizations can trust it. So that brings us naturally to cybersecurity, data governance, especially in an era of bring your own AI. So Stuart's going to share how organizations can embrace AI confidently while protecting their data, their systems, and their reputation. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin, and thank you, Rhys. It's, as we've heard from all the participants already here, today it's not that AI is on the horizon, it's already here. So employees are using such tools as ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, and many other ways to work faster, solve problems, and improve productivity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, used properly, AI can hugely be positive for business. But it also creates the new security challenge. So the question is no longer, should we allow AI? The real question is, how do we allow AI safely while keeping company and client data secure? And that sits at the heart of Ergos's evolution. And this is something I've been working in the IT support space for about 30 years now. And it's the next pivot, really. It's historically, Ergos was recognized as a managed service provider, an MSP, and our role was to keep systems supported, available, backed up, patched, and running. That's not really where we are today. Cyber threats are increasing, regulatory pressure is growing, users are working from more locations and more devices, and now with more AI tools than ever before. And that's why at Ergos, we evolved from a managed service provider to an MSSP, a managed services security provider. And our role is no longer just to keep systems operational. Our role here is to help clients protect their data, govern and access and monitor the risk, and innovate securely. We want to really not hold things back. We want to make sure that everybody is moving in the right direction, but doing in a safe and controlled way. So we based our service on 6 pillars, really: identity, consent, defense, visibility, policy, and governance. Identity is the first pillar. The modern security perimeter is no longer the office firewall. The new perimeter is a user's identity. Using such things as Microsoft Entra ID and conditional access, we can help ensure that access to client data is based on who the user is and where they're connecting from and what device they're using and whether that device meets the security requirements. And this is particularly important as we move into this new world of bring your own AI, shadow IT, and personal devices. If a user is accessing Microsoft 365 from a managed compliant device, they may receive full access. If they're using Microsoft 365 from an unmanaged or non-compliant device, their access will be restricted, for example, limiting the ability to download, print, or sync sensitive information. This means that we're not simply trusting users to make the right decisions, we're putting controls around the identity level. The second pillar is consent. AI tools and cloud applications represent request permissions to connect to Microsoft 365 data. This can happen through OAuth permissions, and whether the user may unknowingly grant access to applications such as email, SharePoint, Teams, and other business data. The issue is that many users would just click accept without fully understanding what they're approving. Through Entra ID applications, enterprise ID applications, Ergos can help clients identify which applications have access to business data, review permissions, remove high-risk integrations, and introduce an approval process. This is a key part of the cybersecurity governance and helps prevent a well-meaning employee from accidentally giving an external AI platform to all of the sensitive company information. The third pillar is defense, and this is where we use such tools as Cisco Umbrella to play an important role. Cisco Umbrella provides DNS and internet layer protection. It helps prevent users from reaching malicious websites before a connection is even established. This matters because as AI adoption grows, users may search for new AI tools, browser extensions, plugins, and productivity information. Some will be legitimate, others will be fake and malicious and designed to harvest credentials and data. Umbrella protects us before threats reach the endpoint, and it gives the organization better visibility of emerging cloud services and shadow IT activity, including which AI tools users may be trying to access. The fourth pillar is visibility. You cannot secure what you can't see. This is why SIEM is such an important part. A SIEM platform collects and collates security events across identities, endpoints, and cloud services and networks, and it allows activity to be monitored, analyzed, and investigated. For example, if a user suddenly downloads large volumes of SharePoint data, connects to an unknown AI application, or attempts to access information from an unmanaged device, those events can be identified and reviewed. These changes to the security model from a reactive to a proactive space. Instead of waiting for something to go wrong, we can monitor signals, identify unusual behavior, and respond in more quickly. The fifth pillar is policy. So that technology cannot solve the AI challenge alone. People and the process matter just as much. This is why organizations need a clear AI policy. Users need to understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and what types of data must never be entered into public AI tools. At Ergos, we have introduced AI guidance with our cybersecurity policy framework. This includes promoting Microsoft Copilot as the preferred AI platform and restricting types of information that can be submitted to these AI services. That includes sensitive data such as client names, company names, telephone numbers, device names, live URLs, or copyrighted material, and other confidential information. The policy provides the governance framework, and the technology provides the enforcement. Both are needed. The final pillar is governance, and this is especially important when we talk about Microsoft Copilot and enterprise AI. AI does not create a permissions problem. AI exposes an existing permissions problem. If SharePoint permissions are poorly managed, then confidential information may be already accessible to users who should not see it. When Copilot was introduced, that information became easier to find through AI-generated responses. This is why SharePoint governance, access control, data clarification, and permissions management are so important before organizations deploy enterprise AI. Before rolling out AI at scale, businesses need to understand who has access to what data, whether HR, finance, legal, and commercial information is properly secured, whether SharePoint sites and libraries have been structured correctly, whether data retention and classification policies are in place, whether access is reviewed regularly. So without a governance foundation, AI shines a bright light on the existing risks. So just in closing, as Ergos has continued its journey from an MSP to an MSSP, our role is changing. Cybersecurity is no longer just about protecting endpoints and networks. It's about protecting identities, controlling consent, defending users online, monitoring behavior, enforcing policy, and governance data. That is the purpose of the Ergos Secure AI governance model: identity, consent, defense, visibility, policy, and governance. By combining Microsoft Entra ID, Enterprise Application Government, Cisco Umbrella, SIEM, monitoring, clear all AI policies, strong SharePoint governance, Ergos helps clients embrace AI with confidence rather than fear, because the fear is not about stopping AI, the future is about securing AI.
Stuart, thank you very much for running us through that. That's really helpful to address the concerns side of things, which we'll come back to in the Q&A shortly. So that's brilliant. So we've now heard perspectives from practice leadership, finance transformation, AI technology, and cybersecurity. So let's finish by hearing from Dominik. He and his team are building AI native finance operations solutions today, and he can describe the benefits and the value that accountancy practices and their clients are already achieving.
Thank you, Ben. Stuart, regarding your speech, I'm super happy that we are partners since last year. I feel safe after what you've said. So thank you for that, guys. And I need to speak about the history because Rhys told about 2022. This was the date that ChatGPT was released in November to the public. And then everything went into this hype, but these AI models couldn't give ROI to the companies. Unfortunately, all we were following that hype, but it turned out that you can't get real ROI from that. Since 2025, where the reasoning models, thinking models were released, things change. So we've been with this journey since the beginning, but till that year, we've pivoted into accounting, and we were serving first clients AI accounting. But still, it was super hard to understand what we are offering, and this is how our AI platform was created, which is FlowMe. So what I can see right now that there are some layers of the complexity on of the accounting. And for example, such big change for me was when we rolled out our service in the UK. There are two schools of accounting in the world. First is German. We have that in Poland, Germany, France, etc. And there is Anglo-Sax, which is UK, Canada, Australia. It's super different, but the outcome is the same, which is profit and loss, balance sheet. We pay the taxes, we do the analytics. So it was quite of a journey. Right now, I can see that the role of accounting is shifting a lot into the advisors. I think right now open-minded accountants, accountancy office with the tools that are right now available on their market can change the way the business was operating for last 30 years. And to achieve that, there are many variables, like the mindset is most important, because yes, like at the beginning we all said that it's just, everything's changing, it's hard to start. Then there is this mindset of this function if, especially in accounting. Whenever something is X, do Y, and this is how accounting is run for years. Now it's changing. Rhys said about that. AI, it's no more function logic. It generates the outcome randomly, which can be scary. And it was scary because these models, when we entered these times with AI, were just hallucinating. Right now, I don't know. Have you tried the new models from Anthropic? That were blocked by U.S. president. They are scary, okay, and they are not hallucinating, and you can use them for super advanced things. So, going back to accounting, we provide some service. So this service mainly for SMEs is how much money do you need to pay? VAT, tax. And accounting offices like that can have a problem in the future. This is my prediction, guys, because there is more what you can offer to your customers. You can give advices. Still, you will be advising on the rules, etc. But this manual job will be automated with generative AI. And we are reaching that point here in Poland with profit and loss life. Unfortunately, it will not be available in the UK because we have this governance change from April, and the whole Europe is shifting into this electronic invoices. So we are not sending invoices to our clients; we are sending them to HMRC. And from HMRC, our clients are downloading that. So first countries to operate it was Italy and Poland. The next year will be France, Germany. For sure, I don't believe it will be soon in the UK. But if it will be, then you have real-time data. And based on this real-time data, we have shifted with generative AI from passive accounting, which take place after actions were made in the history, into active accounting. So in real time, when the document enters your workflow, everything is done in the same second. So you can show the profit and loss life. So a lot of is changing, but I wouldn't be afraid because we are the beginning, guys. The shift is super slow. We can see AI everywhere, but people using AI, especially in accounting, there are not many. There are not many. So this is my perspective, and this is my advice to test these solutions. Do not be afraid, and just be open.
Dominik, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. As I listen to all of those different perspectives and scribble down some notes, it feels like that tension between where are the opportunities, where's the value, where are the benefits, and actually what is the business environment demanding of accountancy practices, how they need to step up and change the way they work, that tension between opportunity and risk and concerns and compliance and what does this mean for people and change. And of course, that's the classic transformation dilemma that we've always had. But here in this AI world, perhaps more so because of the unknowns, because of the pace of change of the technology, because it's hard for individuals to hold all of this in their head, and we have to work together and trust and work with partners and others to move forwards. So if I can ask a few questions to try and bring a few more thoughts out around that. Piotr, if I might turn to you first with this client perspective, are you finding that your clients are demanding that more adopts AI, uses AI actively within your workflows and within the delivery of their deliverables because it's now expected by them, or actually are they a bit nervous and fearful themselves at the moment? How does that sit?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because being very honest, our environment where we work, our business environment is very complex, as we heard about it. So the issue of confidentiality, the issue of accuracy, the issue of accessibility of the data. So our clients are demanding the more accurate, more real-time data, more valuable data, because the sooner you give the data, you send the data, the better result you can gain and better decisions you can take. So being honest, probably I haven't heard in Poland that our clients are coming and saying, please give us cheaper or quicker because AI is existing. Nevertheless, when you talk to the owners of the businesses and to the managers, they say, well, we are not receiving good data. For example, Dominik said, well, we can have the real-time P&L, and being very, very honest, in the big corporation, it exists already, but based on provisions. We as accountants, we know very well that the provisions are there. I mean, we must provision what happens in the future, and based on that, do the provisions in our accounts so we can deliver, let's say, real-time P&L, but that's based on our expectations. But if you have your data available and accessible, kept, of course, confidentiality and with all the restrictions were mentioned by Stuart, then we can change from the provisions to real data-based results. So that's really, I would say, that's something amazing. I mean, that we as accountants, we can deliver the data which are expected, which are very valuable, because the managers and owners, they want to hear something which helps them to manage on a daily basis, right? So the accuracy of data is much, much higher. Of course, we ask ourselves many questions, the questions which I raised here about, for example, are the data kept confidential? Can we really share the models and how we look through with the clients to provide the information that this is well stored, that there is no risk, that everything what we are doing is let's say securized for their interest, right? So those were the discussion we had with Dominik, and the platform and the LLM models. Now they really allows us to make it very, very secure. So when you ask the question, do they ask about AI transformation? I would say no, but do they ask about cheaper, quicker, better results? Yes, every day. I mean, that's a normal question. Maybe last comment from my side, what I hear from my colleagues, and when I observe also my people, we need the people who are curious about the AI world, who are open for that, who are really looking for the opportunities, agents, AI agents, but also the platforms as Automee is offering. Why? Because it changes, it somehow challenges your everyday working life. I mean, it changes in a way that you don't need to make any bookings anymore. You just base your work on analyzing, on reporting, on advisory. You gain your time to deliver much better service and really be closer to your clients, because the clients are not waiting for an accounting. They're waiting for the results, for reporting, for information, for something which changes their business, right? So that's very, very important. And that is something which we see in Poland, because in Poland, as Dominik said, we have this electronic invoicing system, and the big data which are already stored at the Ministry of Finance website. So it has changed dramatically. It has changed dramatically.
Piotr, that's a really comprehensive response there. It really helps us understand that we should always be thinking about the benefits and the value and the drivers for how we improve as businesses and deliver for our clients. AI is an enabler of that. And how do we then use it appropriately in the right contexts? Simon, when you and I talked about this a few weeks ago, you brought up the concept of tribal knowledge. We talked about that and how AI will help us in this environment to capture and continue to learn. Can you tell us a little bit in this forum about your thoughts on tribal knowledge?
Certainly. So when you look at process adoptions by businesses, typically you're going to be very structured approach, very high level IDEF mapping. I'm talking very big organizations here, everything from level 1 down to 4, get to desktop guys, just making sure that you can execute a very standard structured process. But it's who are the customers, who are the suppliers, how does this one behave, what are they going to be saying, what's that going to be done? Now you try and, as large organizations, you try and impose your policies and the way that you need to be talked to on your suppliers and customers. But as a smaller organizations, I think this tribal knowledge is much more nimble. It needs to be, it's much more embedded, there's less structure. And I think what I'm anticipating and hoping that AI can actually anticipate and learn that a lot quicker in order to translate that into meaningful insight for the operators of the finance teams and the accountants who hopefully aren't processing, but to Piotr's point, is looking to the future. The results face effectively table stakes now. They are delivered. That's what you did in the past, but the execution of the processes dealt with, dealing with the subtleties and nuances through tribal knowledge is helped and assisted by AI, but the people that are left working with customers, clients, are really able to focus on the future to be able to drive more value out of their business.
Very, very much, Simon. And then, Rhys, I know that your organisation, Open Reply, works with small, medium, and very large enterprises. You work with all sorts of different kinds of customers across different industries. And I wonder where some of these organisations are really seeing measurable value from AI in practice, not theory. And also, given you deal with smaller firms as well, people assume AI is generally for organizations with large budgets and big IT departments. How is that true? How do you find that as you engage with the market?
Sure. So, I mean, let's start with the sort of the cost point. Over the last few years, the cost point of AI has reduced dramatically, and there are two drivers on that. There are more players in the market which have driven the cost down, but there are also providers that are baking in meaningful AI into their products. So if we look at Automee as an example, a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done to benefit multiple customers. So the cost of that benefit from a consumer perspective is much more accessible versus having to go out and build this type of technology yourself. Yeah, that side of things, if you're looking at bespoke systems and using AI in a new sort of problem space, or a problem space that you want to directly build in versus buying off the shelf, that's generally where a lot of the sort of the cost comes into it. Stuart spoke earlier about securing the perimeter of large language models. It's the same around the system as a whole. There's a lot of work outside just plugging the AI in that makes that sort of a much more expensive process, and something usually that much larger enterprises and organizations will look towards, because there's an element of ownership and customization there. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got tooling like your co-pilots and assistants that have come out in products like Microsoft 365 that provide access to meaningful AI at a sort of a relatively affordable cost point. As I've said, the vendors that are building in meaningful AI into their products, and I say meaningful AI because we see examples of AI for the sake of AI, and I think when that is the case, it can be a very frustrating experience with AI, using it and just finding that it's not really geared up to what you want. When it's been considered and put into a product and well thought out in terms of the experience that gives, then generally those sort of products, as I've said, are more sort of cost effective and don't require a lot of the work and experimentation that goes into it. I would say, from a looking at the value perspective, certainly in my world, when we're consulting and helping customers think about products and build out products, we would spend a lot of time up front trying to understand what's the problem space, what's the vision, what are your requirements, what are you trying to achieve here. And a lot of that would involve them prototyping to show, this is the art of the possible. Is this reflective of what you're hoping to achieve? Those timelines with AI are compressed from weeks and months to days. So that's a very tangible cost reduction in terms of getting people on the same page and having a product prototype that is representative of where everyone wants to sort of build towards. So that has, from a build perspective, made these types of services much more accessible. So it's not just the big players that can look at bespoke. It's becoming much more of the SMEs as well that have access, purely because AI can be leveraged to accelerate lots of parts of that process. And I think finally, there's almost, as I said at the start, there is still that arms race in terms of employee and consumer expectations. And one of the biggest expectations we see on the market at the moment is the ability to have conversations with products to try and reduce the time between a question and an answer, reduce that sort of that value gap. So those types of systems are becoming a lot cheaper because there's a lot more supply of those based on an increase in demand. So usually a very common way into this space is organizations adding in some degree of conversational experience on websites or as part of the product. So rather than clicking around and trying to find things myself or trying to run sort of searches and configure filters myself, I can have a conversation. What are the accounts telling me now? What do I need to be concerned about? Let's run a scenario. What if this information was different? The ability to just have that conversation and get that real-time feedback is becoming much more of an expectation and a driver for more organizations to look at that technology, and an incentive for organizations that are building that technology to make it much more cost effective and competitive.
Amazing. Thank you, Rhys. That's excellent summary of that. Thank you very, very much. So, Stuart, you've mentioned your 6-point program. I guess each firm ought to go on a journey as they introduce AI into kind of business critical processes. What are your thoughts on the journey that a firm should go through so that people in our audience can be thinking, this is how I need to engage with this?
Thanks, Benjamin. That's a great question. And Rhys, I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of what you're saying there. That a lot of the drivers here for adoption of AI are, the cost of living is a massive thing in the UK. The cost of running a small business, national insurance, all of the different expenditures that are out there at the moment. So I think actually when people are looking and turning to AI, it's very much about a cost optimization exercise. There's a productivity exercise that has to be undertaken. And we work with a lot of SME businesses, a lot of owner-led businesses where essentially they don't have massive finance departments, or, when it comes to it, a lot of the time, if there's money for a new project or some new migration or advances, it's the owner that you're talking to, because there's a direct line between their finances and what they're trying to do in the UK. And SMEs make up, they are the largest amount of businesses that actually run in the UK. So there is a huge appetite for AI adoption and making sure that we can optimize. And in a lot of cases, especially where it's tight and margins have been eroded over time, a successful AI adoption can be the difference between a business actually succeeding and moving on, and rather than folding and crashing. So it is incredibly important, and I think the UK especially have got a big appetite for this. But it's just making sure that it's done in a regulated way. Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus are a great framework for small organizations to look at. ISO 27001 is okay, is good. We are ISO 27001, but it could be a bit heavy for some smaller organizations. So then I'd ask them to maybe look at the 42001, which is the new AI ISO that's just coming around the corner. And I'm not trying to add more, overhead into a business or more, bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake. It's more actually just remembering that there's a human in the middle. And what we're actually trying to do is optimize the human in the middle to be more productive, to be more effective, and for the business to run. And just if you are venturing into this space and you want some external guardrails, as Rhys mentioned, those two are a really good place to look. Cyber Essentials, because it's practical and it evolves. ISMA is the governing body, and they bring out new guidelines every year. And then with an ISO, which might be a bit heavy for some SMEs to look at, but essentially what I'm talking about is two sides of the same coin. You use Cyber Essentials for actually dealing with the tech and what policies need to be enforced. And then if you look at the ISO from the people perspective, that's more about induction, bringing people on, making sure that you're setting their expectations and what they can and cannot do right from the start, making sure that your handbook's up to date, all of that sort of, fairly easy stuff. But if you can get ahead of that so that actually you've got all of these policies and procedures in place, new employees that are onboarding and dealing with all of these new tools have got some clear guidance of what they actually need and what their expectation is. So I think that's where I'd start, is looking at those two frameworks.
Brilliant, Stuart. Thank you very, very much for that. And as our final question, Dominik, for you, thinking ahead a few years, what do you think an AI-enabled accountancy or finance operation will look like in a few years' time, in 5 years?
Yeah, I love the predictions because right now everyone's speaking about AI, how it will look in the future is a prediction. Even though Sam Altman has changed his prediction lately on his Australia speech, that he said, no, AI will not replace people so fast. Okay, so we will see, guys. I do believe that some of the jobs will end, especially accounting, because it's a math, a regulation. But it doesn't mean that financial operations will end, because they will be with us forever. Like I said, advising for sure. And probably you can handle more with less people. This tendency, for sure, we will see in short period of time. But yes, customers will expect the data cheaper and faster. We will see what happens. I have no idea. Honestly, I have no idea. I'm open. I'm in this team that AI will help us and achieve better results as a human being, guys. And this, for sure, it's granted right now with these models, because I'm on the different level on coding, and I'm not IT. I'm a humanist education. I can be a designer. I can be an accountant right now. So we will see what happens. We will see. And luckily, there is lack of employees on the market, especially in the Europe. So we are safe. We are safe. It will be balanced. This is my prediction. You're muted, Ben. Yeah. I thought something with my headphones.
Oh, I've done so well. I do apologize. Thanks to all of our panelists for their perspectives and thoughts on our follow-up questions. We're out of time now. I'd like to thank Piotr, Simon, Rhys, Stuart, and Dominik for sharing their views with us all today. I think even on this panel during this last hour, we've learned a lot from each other, given our different business and technology perspectives. And we really hope that you all go away with learnings and calls to action that you can now take within your own firms. We'll share the webinar recording with you. If you've got any follow-up questions for us, for any of our panelists, do let us know. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very, very much.